the won't go down. So now we're going to have to mark this as to where we want the hole drilled for the release pin to go down in to catch the spring inside. Alright, just get in here with a pencil, draw around your release pin. This one I got a little close to the edge, but we'll make it work one way or another here. So now I'm going to get the drill that hole to the depth that I need for the pin to go into, and then it's put the release spring and push button in. Okay, we got the hole drilled now. Gave it a little bit of clearance there in case wood shrinks and swells over time, which it generally does. And you can see we got a nice smooth fit there. So, on to the release springs. Alright, got the Patchbox catch pin in, and I went ahead and did a preliminary bevel on it so we can test it out, but I have not cut the notch in it yet for the spring to hold it nice and tight. Here is the catch spring, and I showed you earlier how I cut this out of a piece of 3/16 inch tool steel. This is just 01 oil hardening, very easy to deal with. And basically I showed you how I milled out this section here to create the lip, and then cut a hacksaw line straight down and bent this out just using a propane torch and a pair of pliers to create that shape I wanted. Then this was heat treated and tempered, so it's got just enough spring in it now so it'll work just perfectly. Now I cut out this cavity for it. Cheated a little bit. I used Mr. Dremel. Mr. Dremel can be your friend if you don't let it get away from you. But as thin as this wall is on the end here in relationship to the Patchbox cavity, I didn't want to get in there with chisels and take a chance of knocking the wood out. So I used an 1/8 inch bit on the Dremel, took out this area just enough for the spring to fit in, and already done the screw here. Remember to always drill a pilot hole, put a little wax on your screw the first time to help it cut threads into the wood. And into the end grain like this, it's not a difficult thing to do. And when you tighten this down, back it off about a 1/4 turn. You want that to be able to rotate in there and create that nice springy effect. Now when I close this down, you can see it catches it nicely. This is just friction on it. It's not going to hold that in place until I cut that small lip in there for the catch. And that's done with a needle file 3/4 or 3/4. And what I'll need to do is mark this with a little tool just to show me where that's going to be. Then the next step will be putting in the push rod. The push rod should be centered on your butt plate on the top here. You can also put them in from the bottom if you want. Of course, the spring here will have to be reversed if you do that. And the push rod should go in as straight as possible. So it might be hitting a little bit low, and if it is hitting low and it's a very hard pressure to get that Patchbox to open, you can remove some of the tension on the back spring there on the catch spring by simply filing it away a little bit, making it thinner and thinner. Just don't get it so thin that it doesn't hold nice and tight when you've got the lid closed. So the next thing I'll have to do now is I'll pencil in some lines this way and on top to give me a reference for drilling a hole in, so that the push rod will then work against that catch spring. I've got my pencil lines drawn on here now. I got one across here, kind of hard to see. One across the top here, and I I've center punched the top flat of the butt plate right where I want it to be, because you want that centered. And now the trick will be just to line this up both this way and this way. If you're not certain about how well you can do this, get a friend to watch from this way, and he can tell you if the drill is going up or down, and you can be watching the left to right. Sometimes that helps a lot, just to be able to see what's going on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a slightly undersized hole. The push rod is 1/8 inch, so I've got a slightly smaller bit, and I'm going to watch this, and I'm aiming for the hole. Pretty thick butt plate. Now, through the metal part. Really nice having real soft brass when you're doing stuff like this. Most of the brass pieces you buy now that are investment cast are actually a soft bronze, and they're very durable, very tough. You can wear out files working on them, wear out drill bits. I cast most of my parts out of soft yellow brass, make sure they're annealed, that way I can bend and shape without any trouble. I'm not worried about breaking anything. That's especially true when dealing with trigger guards. These, when you start bending them to fit, you can take a chance of fracturing it somewhere. So even if you've got the bronze ones today, heat them up to starting to glow red in a darkened room, and quench them in water. That will anneal them as much as they can get, and you can bend them without as much chance of them breaking. Now that I've got through the butt plate, I want to make sure I'm in line with, basically I'm heading towards the screw here, and I'm heading towards this hole. So I'm going to get at a slight 45 so I can kind of watch both directions at the same time. Taking it kind of slow. Just hanging on the back end of this thing here. There's not a lot of gripping area. Slightly longer bit to get all the way down there. So, excuse me just a moment. I'm going to run over and get my 6-inch drills. Got my 6-inch long drill here. This one is the full 1/8 inch. You can get these at just about any hardware store. So aircraft drills sometimes if they're a little longer, but this is a good 6-inch one. Finish drilling that hole to the full depth. See, I was hitting the spring on the inside, so that's a good time to stop. Now, I'm going to take off the butt plate. And we get our pin. Okay. I need to enlarge the hole one more drill bit size to clear for that longer pin. Okay, the pin is 1/8 inch, so we'll go up to 9/64 and see if that'll clear it enough. There. It's a little tight still. I might go up one more size, but you see how it's activating that spring now when I push on it. And that's great. You want enough play in there so that the spring works good, but it's not going to be binding up here. So let me go up one more size. Again, we got to worry about shrink and swell of that wood in time. Moisture gets in there, cause that to jam up, and if you're out in the woods hunting and you need to get in your patch box, you won't be able to. So this making that large enough now. We'll make sure that you won't have any binding in the future. There, that's good. Okay, still a little tight. Now the spring is going to need to be loosened a little bit. It's a little hard. But it won't take much to make that a little bit easier to push. Right, it's hurting my thumb a little bit. So, now, next thing will be to finish drilling the hole in the butt plate to the diameter of the top of your button. Don't want to drill that size because that's going to be your washer on the back side to keep it from coming out through the top of the butt plate. So, now I'll drill this out, come back and show you how we get this adjusted to depth. Alright, the hole is drilled. I went in with a Dremel and took out a little bit of wood in here so that this washer piece will fit down in there when it's used. Don't worry about how deep it is. You just want it a little bit larger than this so there's no binding, and deep enough so that when it's pressed, this will go in to the wood slightly. If you need to deepen it some more, you can do that after we start getting this adjusted. The way I measure for the length of this now is get that in there, put the butt plate on, and with the ruler you want to measure the distance between the wood and the butt plate. Just get a rough estimate at this time, and it looks like we're at about 5/8 of an inch. So that's the first amount I will take off of this, leaving it a little bit long for custom adjustment towards the end, but right now I just want to rough all this off. Easier to cut it off slowly than to try and stretch this again later. So let me run down here, cut this excess off. And we'll see how close we've gotten it. Getting there. as long as this ring is still above the surface, I know we haven't got it quite deep enough yet. But we'll try it again. And there's a little bit of a gap still. And we're looking at about 3/16 of an inch. So we'll mark that much on here. And I'm going to, instead of sawing this off, I'm just going to grind this down so I can get right down to it without taking too much. So I shall be right back. Well, I got the Patchbox release finished. Got the button cut to the proper length, no rattle and play in it. It is a little bit longer than I want it to be, but I'll trim that down later on. The main thing is, works good, flips the lid open nice, and can't pry it up. That's mainly what you're looking for. Next thing will be to get this gun carved, graved, stain and finish, and off to the customer. And hopefully I'm gonna come up with another episode of something or other here and let you guys be filled in on some of my secrets. All right, take care. Bye.